new melody. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm going to call that the Nigun for Vasya. I say that looking at my cat Vasya right now. I wrote this yesterday. For those of you who saw the podcast, you know that something has been off, and the off thing is that our cat is in acute renal failure right now. And we riffed a little bit in the podcast about Judaism's relationship with animals, including house pets. And he's doing a little bit better today, but it's going to be weeks before we know if he's going to live. And so as I was up here bawling my eyes out, and Katrine was downstairs bawling her eyes out, I was trying to figure out how to do an Orza Ruah for tonight. Since I wasn't satisfied with what I did last week, that melody came out, so we're going to be there in just a little bit. Let's hear it one more time. There's old Hasidic tales about all the preparations for Shabbat, people walking through the shtetl, trying to get preparations, that the holiest thing that was collected to bring back home for Shabbat was actually a new melody, a new nigun. So, the first part. A lot of these turns up and down throughout. Do as many of those as you want. It'll be harmony if you do it at a different time than I am. And then the C figure is. Of course, when we get to Orza Ruah, it is talking about the light shining on those who are righteous. Had an amazing student many years ago, well, not too many years ago actually, in a shul outside of Seattle, Washington, who we had an amazing youth program there that was built by my colleague Laura Cannon and myself, and an amazing human being named Tova Ganana. And the trio of us, it was a 120 family shul, and we would have regularly 60, 70, 80, 90 people there for Sunday morning services for religious school. Usually more than we had for Shabbos. And we did generative prayer, something to actually try yourself instead of, as you're going through the Birkat HaShachar, the morning blessings, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, blessed be eternal our God, who gave us clothing, who clothes us, who makes straight the bend, who wakes us up, who helps us differentiate between light and darkness. And what we would do is we would go through in Nusach, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, she'natan lanu et, who gave us, and then one of the youth would raise their hands and they would say what is part of our gift of being in this great relationship with our tradition. And if the older kids would say it in Hebrew, and then we would all say that together in Hebrew and say Amen, we generate our prayer together. And it was an open dialogue between some of the wisest youth you'll ever meet. And one of the youth, one of my favorite human beings on the face of this planet, after we were studying Elohim Shmashna Tatabi, eternal, the soul that you've given me is pure. This, at the time, 11-year-old human being said, but what if our soul isn't pure? Now, if we don't listen to our children, we are making a big mistake. And the answer that I gave, I don't know if it's the right answer, but it's the best I could do with an 11-year-old making a plea like that, was most of our prayers in Judaism are aspirational. So, or Zerua, when we talk about the light shining upon the righteous, I'm not righteous. Most likely you're not either. Our soul is pure. That means the stuff we're made out of at its core is good stuff. This is the shining Zohar of the universe. But we mess up and we hurt other people, and right now we have to acknowledge that because we are about to step into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But we still sing Or Zerua, Tzadikim, light shining upon the righteous. Why? Because we hope to be that. We hope to go through the process of learning that eventually brings us to something greater. And it's worth singing Or Zerua, Tzadikim with a little bit of passion on occasion. So a new melody for us tonight. I'll have it up after the high holidays on my SoundCloud and then attached to BeitVirtuali.org. In the meantime, thank you for joining us. We are here about every other week. Next time will be right after Yom Kippur. But join us. Make yourself some sacred space right now. Be a participant. Listen, if you can't sing along or if you're not in a position, at the very minimum, move your lips or tap your fingers. We're actually using Seder Sim Shalom. You can pause the playback right now and find it maybe online. You should order yourself a copy or pull out any traditional prayer book. We'll echo this, or pull out a Reform prayer book, and it'll be a little truncated. Either way, we should all be able to find ourselves with each other, regardless of the differences of our Sidurim. So join me. We are trying to find our way to Shabbos together. We do that starting in this prayer book on page 15, the first of these 6 psalms, one for each day of the week, until we get to finally Shabbat, and we bow and greet the Sabbath bride together. This is west, this is east in the studio that I'm in. So we turn to the west to greet the Sabbath bride, because that's the direction that the Shekhinah, the presence of the Eternal, entered into Jerusalem. And then after it's entered us, and later when we encounter that which is greater than us, we turn around to the east. A lot of shuls, we turn to the door and bow. It's actually turning to the west to bow, as long as we're on that side of Jerusalem. So let's find our way to bowing together and welcoming Shabbat, because I'm not ready. I'm so worried about that little creature that we call our cat that I can barely even think tonight. So join me. None of us are ready. None of us are righteous in this moment. But let's find a way to be in Shabbat together and hone ourselves into a new kind of righteousness as well. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
הגיעו אלינו אנחנו אמריתו בצור ידו ובקולו תשמעו את אשר לבכם מלחמה ויום הסוף המדבר אשר סייעתכם וכליהם עפו ישנה אקוד בדור אמרתו אלבתם ולא יראו דרכי אשר נשבעתי באפי אם יבואו למנוחתי.
Sing a new song together. In other words, even if it's a melody we know or we don't know, we put ourselves into it, we do something to make it new.
שיר חדש שירו לאדוני כל הארץ שירו לאדוני שיר חדש שירו לאדוני כל הארץ שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו בעשרים יום ליום שבועתו עשר מיליון ליהושעתו ספר לגויים כבודו בכל העמים ותותיו גדול אדוני כולם מאוד נוראו על כל אלוהים יכל אליהם העם אליהם Adonai Shemayim Asa Od Ve'adar Lefanav Od Tiferet Be'mikdasho Adonai Mishpachot Amim Adonai Kod Ha'od Adonai Kod Shmo Seu Minach Kol HaKotam Yishtakun Adonai Behadrat Kodesh Ilu Mifanav Kol Haaretz Ilu Lagonim Adonai Ma'ala Avti Kotel V'Ativo Yadinamim B'Mesharim Yismechu Shamayim Yismechu Shamayim Yismechu Shamayim V'Tagil Haaretz Yismechu Shamayim Yismechu Shamayim Yismechu Shamayim V'Tagil Haaretz Yiram hayam, yiram hayam, umlo. Yiram hayam, yiram hayam, yiram hayam, umlo. Yismechu shamayim, yismechu shamayim, yismechu shamayim, v'tagil haaretz. Yismechu shamayim. Tagel haaretz, yom hayam lo, ya'lo sadai v'chol asher bo, az nochal la'tzeit ya'ar, lifnei Adonai kiva lishpot haaretz, yishpot b'tzedek, ve'amin be'emunato. Adonai malach, tagel haaretz, Yismechuim Rabim, anan b'refes v'iva, tzedek mishpat mechon kisosh. Latzadik, Ozarua, Latzadik, Uleishrele Simcha, Uleishrele Simcha, Simchut Tzadikim Badonai, Simchut Tzadikim Badonai, Vehodu Lezecher Kocho, Vehodu Lezecher Kocho, Ozoru Alatzadik Yisrael Simcha, Ozoru Alatzadik Yisrael Sim, Ozoru Alatzadik Yisrael Simcha, Ozoru Alatzadik Yisrael Simcha. Mizmor shiru l'Adonai, shir chadash, ki niflaot asa, hoshir lo yamino, zro kodsho, hodia Adonai, Yeshuato, Le'enei hagoyim, Hilatzi kato, Zachar chazdo, Ve'emunato, Levet Yisrael, Yevet Yisrael, Afsei Aretz, Yet Yeshuat Eloheinu, Ariel Adonai, Kol Haaretz, Yitzchu v'ranenu v'zamer, Zamru Adonai, Bechino, Bechino, v'kol zimra, b'chatzor, v'kol shofar, hariu nifnei hamelech Adonai. Yoshveva, Nerodim Cholcha, Yacharim Yaroneinu, Nifnei Adonai Kiva Lishvot Haaretz, Yishvot Teva B'tzedek, Yamim B'mesharim. Adonai Malach, Yugazu Amin, Yoshev Kruvim Tanut Haaretz, Amir Tzion Ram Hu Al Kol Elohim. If ever I skip something and you don't want to miss it, just pause, daven through whatever you need to daven through. Romemu, Romemu, Adonai, Elohim, Romemu, Romemu, Adonai, Romemu, Romemu, Adonai, Elohim, Romemu, Romemu, Adonai. וישתחוו להר קודשו, וישתחוו להר קודשו, וישתחוו להר קודשו וקודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו, כי קדוש אדוני, כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו, כי קדוש אדוני. וישתחוו להר קודשו, וישתחוו להר קודשו, וישתחוו להר קודשו וקודשו. וישתחוו להר קודשו, וישתחוו להר קודשו, וישתחוו להר קודשו וקודשו. לך דודי לקראת קלה פני Shabbat, B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. Shemo v'zacho, b'dibor echad, yishmi'an, el hamiuchad Adonai echad, u'shemo echad Hashem u'tiferet b'li tila, lecha dodi, likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. Likrat Shabbat, לכו ונלכה כי היא מקור הברכה מראש מקדם. נסוך סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. מקדש מלך עם מלוכה קומיצאי, מתוך האף הרב לשבת, בעמק הבכה והוא יחמול עלייך חמלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. מתנערי, עפגו מלישנתי, יפתחה מעל יד במשם, וצלח נגרה על נפשי גניאלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. התעוררי, כי באורן, אורי, ידבר כבוד אדוני עלייך נאמן. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. Lecha dodi, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. Lecha dodi, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. לא תבושי ולא תגעלי, מה תשתוכחי ומה תביבך, יחסו ענקי עמי ונתחתי רעתילה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. והיו שיסה שוסייך ורחת גופות מבלייך, יסיס עלייך אלוהייך כמסות ענן העגלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. גם מן ושמאל תמרוצי ואדוני תריצי על יד איש מפצי ונצרחה ונגילה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. בואי ושלום, עטרת מעלה, גם בשמחה, אותו לתוך אמונה, עם סגולה. בואי כלה, בואי כלה. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. לך דודי, לקראת כלה. B'nei Shabbat, Nekabela. Bottom of 23. Tzadik
התמה יפרח, וארז בלבנון ישגה, שתולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו, אור ינובון בסביבה, דשאים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי ישר אדוני, צורי צורי ולא עוולה תבוא. הנמלך גאות לבש, לבש אדוני עוז התפזר, אף תכונתבל בלטימות, נכון כיסך מאז מעולם עתה, נשאו נערות אדוני, נשאו נערות כולם, יסעו נהרות דוח ים. כל עוד מים רבים אדירים משברי ים, מכל עוד מים רבים אדירים משברי ים, אדיר במרום אדוני, מגולות מים רבים אדירים משברי ים, מגולות מים רבים אדירים משברי ים, אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני, מגולות מים רבים. It's Shabbos, come on, let's do this. אדירים משברי ים, מגולות מים רבים אדירים משברי ים, אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני. Time for a deep breath. For those of you joining Beit Virtuali for the first time, we don't have a physical minyan present. This is an online synagogue purely right now, even though there's probably a minyan watching this, or at least it will be over time. We don't do Baruch, but we acknowledge that it's there. We don't do Kaddish, but we acknowledge that it's there. So we take a moment to prepare ourselves to step into our obligated prayers, our Arvit service, with a deep breath, and understand that we're slowly working together across the world as we meet. We're standing together in a profound way, getting ready to enter into, encounter something that is greater than us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro mariv aravim, b'chokhma potech sharim, ובפונם שניתי מחליף את הזמנים, מסדר את הכוכבים, ומשנותיהם מרקיע כרצונו, מורה יום ולילה, גולל אור מפני חושך, וחושך מפני אור, ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמידים לא חלים לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הערבים. 29. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. אהבת עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות חוקים משפטים אותם לימדת. תורה ומצוות חוקים משפטים אותם לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו בשוכבנו ובקומנו נשיח בחוקך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ומצוותיך לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נקיימם לילה. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נקיימם בלילה. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נקיימם בלילה. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נקיימם בלילה. באהבתך תסיר ממנו לעולמי, לעולמי. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב את עמו ישראל. Come to the Shema, page 30, the only prayer that we absolutely are not allowed to go past without finding Kavanah. Take that breath, feel ourselves connected to at least one other human being, and see if we can spread that even further, maybe even covering the entire world. We actually call that Ha'olam Haba, or Yemot HaMashiach, the coming days of the days of the Messiah. Nai, nai, nai. Nai, 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 nai. Nai, nai, nai. Yai, nai, nai, nai. Ya, nai, nai. Na, 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 na. Ya, na, 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 na. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Yai, nai, nai. Nai, yai, nai, nai. Nai, nai, nai. Nai, 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 nai. Ya, nai, nai. Ya, nai, nai, nai. Ya, nai, 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 nai. Pushing forward to Le'olam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבך, שנתן לבניך בראתה פעם, שבתך וביתך ובטחך בדרך, ושוכבך ובקומך, כשאתם מאוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בעיניך, וכתבתם המזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. השמיים על הארץ, ויאמר אדוני משה לאמור. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, הייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם. אמת ואמונה כל זאת וקיים עלינו, כי הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ואין זולתו, ואנחנו ישראל עמו. מלכותו ברצו קיבלו עליהם, משה בני ישראל לכו אנו שירת שמחה רבה, וברוך עולם. We're just a few days before Rosh Hashanah, so in the month of Elul we can start sneaking in some melodies that belong only in the high holy days. So let's start hearing that nigun in our head, because it's almost New Year. Yai na nai 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 nai, yai na nai 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 nai, yai nai na nai na na nai, yai nai nai nai. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha neda b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef elei. מלכותך ראו בניך, וכהים לפני משה, זה לי אנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. נאמר, יפעל אדוני את יעקב, ולא ירח חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני. Sing this with me. Yai da da da, yai nai nai, yai da 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 nai nai, yai nai na 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 nai. Gaal Yisrael. Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom. Ve'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim. Hashivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom. Ve'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim. Ufros aleinu Sukat Shelomecha. Ufros aleinu Sukat Shelomecha. Hashivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom, L'Shalom. Ve'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim. L'chaim. V'ashinu l'man shmech v'n'madinu v'semenu v'yivdega chevra v'yakon v'yasasr v'flecha v'melchenu v'v'tzeh v'nfechet asirenu ki tashumrenu matzinenu ata ki melech v'nrachum ata u'shmo tzedenu v'chenu shalom ata v'adolam v'oslenu zkat shalomecha Baruch ata Adonai הפורש זkat שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל ירושלים. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. יאי נאי נאי ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, וביום השביעי שבת vayinafesh. Haggadah begins on page 35. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufia gita hilatecha. As always, if I start playing before you're done, just pause, take as long as you possibly want to daven through the Amidah. You let out some Imrefi Vegion Libi Lefanecha Adonai Tsuri Adonai Tsuri Vegoani Yiyu Leratzon Imrefi Vegion Libi Lefanecha Adonai Tsuri Adonai Tsuri Vegoani I took the liberty to just put one of my old compositions behind me to make a little bit of a point for those who are composers and who have a clear enough connection to see it. It's one of my favorite pieces I wrote when I was probably 19 or 20. It's a clarinet piano sonata called Elegy. It's tonally simplistic. It's not that easy to play on the clarinet, which I guess is kind of the point if you're a clarinetist. But part of the writing of this piece came from the advice of a man who would later become one of my most important mentors, one of my composition teachers, a man by the name of David Maslenka of blessed memory. Most of you who played a band instrument in the United States of America probably know him for Roller Takes a Walk. But do yourself a favor and go onto YouTube after Shabbos and just look up David Maslenka and listen to In Memoriam, Symphonies 1, 2, 3, and 4, his Mass that he wrote, etc. And the advice that he gave started with a blank piece of manuscript paper. And he said this is the single most terrifying thing for a composer. And one of his techniques is he, usually, he worked on commission for many, many years, and not many composers in the 20th century and early 21st century were able to do that. He's a pretty amazing man, was an amazing man. But so he would know who he was writing for, and he had all these wonderful techniques that I think are just life wisdom, and including he wouldn't compose something without a picture of the group he was composing it for or a found object, and he would use that as an object of meditation. But what he would do is he would put his music together and he would write down the instruments and whatnot, and then he would write one note somewhere or one interval somewhere. He would create a limitation and for himself in order to compose, because it's almost impossible to exist in a world of blank manuscript paper. We need something to create some sort of limitation in order to give us the freedom to move forward. And I was thinking a lot this week of a movie that came out in the early 2000s. I really should have looked it up, but as you can see, I don't use notes for sermons that I give. But it's a movie quasi-documentary by Lars von Trier. Yes, I realize that from a Jewish perspective, it's very complicated to mention Lars von Trier. That's a sermon or a conversation for a very, very, very different day. The one point that I'll put out there is if we stop consuming art by people who were not the best people on the face of this planet, there's almost no art we can consume. So just I'll throw that out there. And again, if we were an artist and someone dug through our entire history, would we be spotless as well? Again, in a world where ethics are falling by the wayside. I'll just throw that little thing out there. But anyway, it's an amazing movie. It's called The Five Obstructions. And again, I really should have looked it up. It's 2003, 4, 5, 6, around that area. And Lars von Trier was working with one of his mentors, again, Jürgen Lett, I believe his name was, who did a movie, black and white movie many years before called The Perfect Gentleman. That was Lars von Trier's favorite movie. And in The Five Obstructions, Jürgen Lett agreed to make the movie 5 more times, each time using a completely different series of constraints. The first one was, I think, no more than 12 frames could be used per shot, and another one had to be animated, which Jürgen Lett hates animation. Another one, it had to be filmed in the most absolute impoverished place on the face of this planet. Every 5 being a fascinating obstruction, but the point was, every single one of the 5 was a better film than the original one. As soon as the obstructions were added, it went from a piece that was meant to jab at what fine society was. It meant to mock high society. And it turned that movie into something completely different. 5 different ways. When we narrow something down, when we put boundaries around it, something takes on a new meaning. A spirit enters it that wasn't there before. And I think that is one of the hidden messages that we get at the beginning of Parshat Nitzavim. The second triennial cycle starts right at the very, very beginning, and we have this very famous passage: Atem netzavim hayom kulachem lifnei Adonai Elohechem. You, all of you. Remember, we were all there at Sinai. This is the generation that passed away. It's the people who inherited the promises of Sinai. So again, still us. We are Bnei Israel. We are the children of the one who wrestles with the eternal. We are that inheritance. So all of us are spiritually standing there this day before the eternal your God, your tribal heads, your elders, your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp. So everyone's standing there, whether they're part of the breach or not part of the breach, from wood chopper to water drawer, to enter into the covenant with the eternal your God, which the eternal your God is concluding with you this day. It's pretty standard fare, right? This sounds a lot like Torah, except for the last words in this translation, with its sanctions. You are standing here today to enter into the covenant with its sanctions, with its limitations and punishments, with the stuff that makes us really dang uncomfortable these days, right? See, there's something really, really difficult going on. What I didn't say about David Maslanka is he was hard to learn from. Brutal. He actually had me take home this series of symphonies by a Swedish composer named Peterson. They're all online. I love them now. Again, its own irony there. They're 45 minutes to an hour and a half long of sensory assault. It is just pounding music at you, complete dissonances, no resolution whatsoever. And it's an absolute sensory assault, and it was torture to listen to. I mean, I was one of those people who grew up on New Age music. I mean, warm milk with honey in it and a little bit of sugar to boot, drinking it. There it is right there. Absolutely nothing to challenge you whatsoever. Okay, I know. I saw George Winston live several times. Debate for a different day, but come on, it's not the complexity of other music that's been written in the last 150 years. And listening to something with so much dissonance, honestly, I couldn't. I remember going into class the next day or the next week, the next time I had an individual lesson with him. I was 22, 23 at the time, and he said, "What did you think of it?" And I was still in that have to please authority. I said, "Well, it was sure interesting." Right? The BS lie that we give when we don't know what else to say. And he looked at me and he said, "I'm going to call you on your BS right now. What did you think of it?" I said, "I hated it. It was awful. I couldn't listen to it." He said, "Good. Now, where did you go?" "What are you talking about?" He said, "The pieces were composed so that you could not stay present. No one can stay present under a sensual assault. When you have so much dissonance coming at you, your mind goes elsewhere. Were you conscious of where it went? When you daydreamed, when your mind wandered, when you tried to meditate, were you conscious of where it went?" I pushed my boundaries and opened up a completely different world. He forced me into a different set of constraints, of sanctions that I'd ever experienced before. And anyone who knows me well can tell you I'm partially a rabbi today because of that right there. Because him giving me a copy of Carl Gustav Jung's Man and His Symbols in order to, as my textbook for a full year of composition. I read an article in The Atlantic earlier this week. Now I say that because the message is going to feel very right of center, and The Atlantic is most certainly not right of center. And it was talking about the issues in culture right now and our desire to keep challenges far away from us, to keep boundaries away from us. When someone tells us, "You can't do that," or narrowing our options, how we throw that away. When we are challenged, how we're throwing it away. And this is a definitely not right of center article saying something that, as someone who worked in corporate America with some amazing women and men, people of such great insight and passion, and some really problematic characters over that time as well. But the article said in most meetings and corporations across the country right now, no one will disagree with anyone else in a meeting. Create an obstruction for them, an obfuscation. Because we have all become so terrified of having anyone put a boundary around us that we're no longer creating any dialogue whatsoever. 10 minutes of you all stand here today in a covenant. And the nature of the covenant, the most important thing to mention when the covenant is mentioned is the covenant with all of its limitations, its sanctions. Judaism isn't meant to take away our freedom. It's meant to give freedom. It's the writing the first notes on the note paper. It doesn't take away. Yeah, okay, ultimately speaking, if I write a G there, I've locked myself into something. And I could sit there and say, by putting a G there, I've taken away the possibility for there being an F sharp there. I totally get it, but it's missing the point that by putting a G there, I've now finally opened up my ability to be creative. The limitation is the moment of creativity. The amount of people that have said, "Oh my goodness, I can't deal with Judaism because that stupid dietary stuff," for example, which is absolutely hilarious because that's a longer discussion altogether. But as someone who has 2 forms of severe arthritis who needs to lose a lot of weight, I can tell you that I used to weigh 30 pounds heavier until I started eating kosher. Why? Because it gave me a limitation. And I'm not talking about all of the complicated issues about health
and weight loss, I'm talking about me right now, needed a limitation in order to enter into a type of health. And yes, it's a struggle, and I know that many of you are struggling this in profound ways with me, but the limitation itself is freedom. When we go through life able to do anything we want to, we stop, we become paralyzed, we can't do anything. Our creativity folds because there's too much out there. If you don't believe me and you think that you're being locked into a box because someone says, pray 3 times a day, there's Jewish law right there. It's actually 5 times. That's a different discussion, but pray 3 times a day right there. Oh my goodness, you're taking away my mojo. Watch how creative you get when you put away your damn cell phone for 3 times a day and see what happens. Limitations are freedom. And we are working so hard to make sure no one ever challenges us again. Our tradition says, and it has the discussion between Shammai and Hillel, or their later schools, saying which of these two is right on this point, and the voice from heaven says, Elu ve'elu, devrim Elohim chayim. This and that are both the words of the living God. 2 contradictory ideas. There is also truth that in those boardrooms and in those discussions and corporations, there are people with highly problematic personalities, and there are people who don't know when to shut up, and there are people who do take over the conversations. And where do we go? Well, both are the truth. 1, we're shutting down everything. 2, there are some people who really need to learn to listen to others. But the truth is not where we've taken it. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Atem nitzavim hayom. We are all standing here today about to enter something. And if that something we enter is where we can't disagree with each other, we are lost. We're gone, because I ain't right about everything and you're not right about everything. And the only way that we get that figured out is when someone who disagrees with us disagrees with us. And we either learn something new or hone our argument. But pushing away every constraint, every obstruction, every obfuscation, yeah, they hurt. They stink. They're awful. You think I enjoyed at the time listening to Peterson? I do now. Atem nitzavim. That Atem is us. We're about to step into Rosh Hashanah, the High Holy Days. And part of that, it's not just, I shouldn't say just listen to the podcast so you can hear about the Rebbe and I talking about Teshuva from a practical level. But it's stepping into a place where we force ourselves to open our minds to where we actually are, not where we think we are, not our illusions, but where we actually are right now. And where we are actually right now is we're right and they're wrong, and they can't tell me anything, and everything has to be my way. And I don't care if you're on the right or the left or any other side of it. We're all doing it right now. It's our existence right now. And that's not Atem netzavim, because notice everyone was standing there together, and that's not who we've become. We can't cross the Jordan River into a promised land until we stand together again, even next to people that we can't stand and whose ideas bother us and whose personalities are contrary to ours. And when they talk to us, maybe it's not in the nicest way. You know, some people have different personalities. Some people teach in different ways. Some people are toxic and we need to stay away from them. We really do. We can just leave them on the other side of the camp as we cross the river. But some people challenge us because we need to be challenged. And if we lose that, we've lost everything. So where are we standing as we cross the river? Where are we standing as we cross into the High Holy Days this year? Let's be a little more self-aware that someone needs to challenge us, needs to make us feel a little constrained this year. I guess that's my High Holy Day sermon for you all, since I am going to be traveling to Mannheim to act as Rabbi in that wonderful community this year. So that's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur rolled into one. So I say, Shabbat Shalom to you all. Shana Tova U'Tuka. May you all have a good and sweet new year. But let's sweeten that by just becoming a little more open to being challenged. Shabbat Shalom. We are closing out the prayer book. It is time for Aleinu. We are together on page, I'm just learning this prayer book still. We are together on, there we go, page 51. Please rise. Aleinu shabeach ladon hakol, latekro le'etze bereshit, shelo asanu k'goyei haratzot, ve'lo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chalkeinu kahem ve'gor aleinu k'chol hamonam. Va'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. V'ne'emar ve'haya Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz bayom ha'u yeh Adonai echad Ushemo Echad. We take a moment to step into remembering those that we have lost in recent days and previous years. Beit Virtuali is brand new. We're less than a month old. This is our second service. Our next service will be, 17th, right? The first Shabbos after Yom Kippur. BeitVirtuali@gmail.com. If there's a name you want remembered on one of our weekends, we will have sometime in the next 2 weeks, we'll have every service out to the new year, so you'll know when it's happening. But if you would like us to read a name, we don't say Kaddish out loud because we don't have a physical minyan yet in this space. Who knows? Maybe we'll get a minyan of Jews packed into the room at some point in the future. It'd be quite amusing. But until then, we do leave the space and acknowledge that. So send those names if you want them spoken out. My heart is with the people who have lost their lives as the Hurricane Ida has gone through the southern states and the eastern seaboard, as dear friends of mine have barely saved Torah scrolls, and people all over the place. That death toll's getting up. And then, of course, I'm still not really able to express my feelings about Afghanistan, but the deaths that are happening, the culture that's taking over is terrifying. And I think that recognizing the brokenness of the world, and that Kaddish is partly how we cry against a broken world, hoping for peace at the end of that, the peace of us becoming complete instead of broken people. So I call those names out, and I give a moment now for you at home to call out names of people that you're thinking about. You know, somehow I think that we all hear them. Zichronam Levacha. May all of the names be for a blessing. Please rise and take this opportunity to say Kaddish, to look at Kaddish, to say an alternative prayer. And we'll come back together with Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom Bimroma Huyaseh Shalom Aleinu Veyad Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimroma Huyaseh Shalom Aleinu Veyad Kol Yisrael V'yimeru Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. For those of you staying for Kiddush, pour yourself some fruit of the vine and join us. For those of you who have braved the service this long, thank you. For those of you who have come back after following us at my previous congregation, thank you for being here. Don't forget to support your local congregations, but we're here for you. And for those of you who are brand new, spend some time with us. Get to know us a little bit. We've got videos. We've got our first podcast went up. Just look through the channel. I think the podcast is going to be one of the things that really takes off. It was so much fun to just be in that dialogue with my amazing wife, even though, of course, as the usual loudmouth rabbi, I spent 90% of the time talking. I'm not going to apologize for it. But Thank you so much for being with us. Vayivoker Yom HaShishi, Vayichula, V'Hashemayim V'Aretz V'Chutz V'Am, Vayichalali Mayom Shvi'i Melakto She'asa, Vayishbot Vayom HaShvi'i Mikol Melakto She'asa, Vayivach Lehim Et Yom Shvi'i Vaykadesh Oto, Ki Vo Shevad Mikol Melakto She'bara Elohim La'asot Savri Chavarai. Yeah, I need to hear you say L'chaim from all the way across the world there. Very good. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'avaratzon hinchen lanu zikaron le'maaseh v'reshit ki hu yom techila lemikrayei kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim ki vanu v'chata ve'otanu kidashta mikol amin V'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat l'chaim. L'chaim. And for those of you who've stayed this long, thank you. Pour yourself an adult beverage or whatever you're comfortable with. We do a little Varbringen. You know, as I travel around the world, hopefully over the next years, doing public speaking and that sort of thing. If you're a member of Beit Virtuali, let me know. I'll let you know when I'm different places. Let me know in the area. We'll try to figure out some way that we can do Varbringen together. It'd be really nice to have the Beit Virtuali community as we grow over time, be able to do this together. I already know what this is. Little Russian vodka here. So everyone, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechol mi bevaro l'chaim l'chaim. It's wonderful to see you all have an incredibly meaningful High Holy Days. Remember, it's real. Remember, it's practical. Remember, it actually can change us, and we all need to change a little bit. Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova Umtuka. We'll see you next time.